Tonight on our news, remembering victims of Hurricane Dorian 3 years later, we are on the ground in Abaco and Grand Bahama with continuing team coverage. Also, a man is dead tonight following what investigators are saying is a suspected suicide, plus recaptured. A man who escaped from the Department of Corrections is back in custody. And later, it's finally back to school for students of Thompson Junior High School. Welcome to our news, a look back at Hurricane Dorian 3 years later. Thanks for joining us. I'm Natalia Hall. An emotional memorial service held today on Abaco to mark the 3rd anniversary of Dorian's landfall. Our team coverage continues tonight with our Jamila Mizik in Grand Bahama and Berthany McDermott in Abaco. Berthany telling us now the memories are real today as they were 3 years ago.
Italia, while Abaco residents didn't show up in high numbers as anticipated, it didn't take away from the emotional toll from those who did show up to pay their respects to the lives lost and to remember the tragedy of Hurricane Dorian. It was a somber mood in Friendship Tabernacle Church as heavy hearts gathered to remember the tragedy of Hurricane Dorian. Songs of praises were followed by tributes from several Abaconians recounting personal stories of what happened on September 1st, 2019.
The 4 loved ones that our family lost from that one house on Bay Street in downtown Marsh Harbor were Astrid Stratton, Connie Snyder, Meldis Vincent, and Emil Raphael. Portions of that house that they sheltered in were found a half-mile inland. According to officials, their remains were never recovered.
This road was not easy to get here. But thanks be to God, who has given us the victory.
Hurricane Dorian crashed into Abaco on September 1st, 2019, leaving behind a trail of death and disaster. Prime Minister Philip Davis and Free National Movement Deputy Leader Shannon Don Cartwright offering words of encouragement during the morning service.
One of the most difficult things about grief is feeling alone. Feeling the world has moved on while you are still mourning. So it is very important to me to tell you that you are not alone, that we are with you.
With the grace from our God and help from each other, Abaco and Grand Bahama and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has persevered.
As many Abaconians are still reeling from the devastation and loss, clergymen prayed for the families left behind and the nation.
There is a peace that surpasses all understanding.
Now, following the memorial service, the wreaths were laid at the altar of Friendship Tabernacle Church to commemorate the lives lost. Members of the community also laying roses at the altar to remember their families and loved ones who died during the tragic hurricane. Obviously an emotional time for them. Prime Minister Philip Davis and Free National Movement Deputy Leader Shannon Don Cartwright among those laying wreaths at that altar. Italia.
Thanks so much for that report, Berthany. Now, immediately following the memorial service and wreath laying today, officials moved to Central Pines Abaco to present keys to 2 families. Former Dome resident Lovely McIntosh receiving the keys to her 2-bedroom home, along with Rebecca Knowles and her family of 5. Now, the Dorian survivors all expressing gratitude after being displaced. There was also a contract signing at the Marsh Harbor Clinic for the refurbishment of 5 clinics across the island. Now, stay tuned to our news tomorrow for more on this. And ahead of today's memorial, one Abaco resident recounting her experience with me, saying life as she knew it is no more.
The storm started to do weird things from it rolled in.
Meet Cara Butler-White, a lawyer originally from New Providence, who took a leap of faith over 20 years ago and moved to the island of Abaco for a simpler life. But life was far from simple when Hurricane Dorian slammed into Abaco in September 2019. Butler-White says she was fully prepared for the storm, but it was something about Hurricane Dorian that felt different once it began to approach Abaco.
It was at that point that I called my sister and I said to her, I am afraid. And this is a person who went through Hurricane Floyd, Jean, Francis, Irene. And so, I thought I'd be prepped, but no, I was afraid.
Shortly after, a tornado split her house in two, forcing her and her son, who was 9 years old at the time, to take shelter in a closet until it was safe to evacuate to a shelter. Eventually, she was transported to New Providence injured, but grateful to be alive.
You don't know which of your friends are still alive. You don't know if your neighbors are still alive. You don't know anything, because when you've passed their house trying to get to the complex, their homes were gone.
Butler-White then moved back to New Providence, where she had to rebuild her life. She says looking back, it's still hard mentally.
So anytime you see that the sky is getting darker, grayer, imminent bad storm is coming, I'm nervous. I start pacing. There was a point where my son could not stand the sound of rain.
As for the rebuilding process on Abaco,
it's going to take some time.
And in our third installment of Where Are They Now?, Megan Shepard speaks with a father who recounts starting over after building his life for more than 80 years.
Pre-Hurricane Dorian, Errol Thurston's two-story home sat just across the street from the water. During Hurricane Dorian, those same calming waters raged through his home. Thurston rode out the storm in Dundas Town with his 3 daughters and grandson.
I was under the water for about a couple of seconds. I had already given up. And my daughter grabbed her little boy and dove under the bathroom door and come up in the passageway so she could get up in the attic.
As the waters rose and the wind force gust, Thurston couldn't imagine what would happen next.
The hurricane knocked the whole thing off, the whole building, and swept it over on the other side of the road through the corner. So we couldn't recognize where we were.
He says they were eventually rescued in a small boat and carried to a home that was already providing shelter for some 90 people.
People sleep on the floor, wet up in water, all about. You hardly could walk.
And now, some 3 years later, Thurston's new home sits just feet away.
They think of, where we were before the hurricane and now where we are now. It's a vast difference. It threw us back so far, I feel it so hard because I am 83 and everything is just gone.
Thurston says since the storm, one of his daughters left the country, another died from lupus, and the remaining daughter is contemplating moving away. Despite how the monstrous storm forever changed his life, Thurston says he's just grateful.
This is not as big as my first house, but we got someplace, But I always think about those who doesn't have anything.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Megan Shepard.
Thanks, Megan. We go now to our Jamila Mizik, who is standing by in Grand Bahama with more on the horrific experience of one Dorian survivor who says despite going through a nightmarish experience, he'll do it all over again.
That's right, Italia Isaiah McIntosh certainly has a story to tell. Tonight he shares with us the details of his story of triumph and survival 3 years later.
I know it was going to be a very, very bad hurricane, but I didn't expect it to be that bad.
61-year-old Isaiah McIntosh is fortunate to have lived to tell the tale. The lifelong McLeanstown resident says the Saturday before Dorian arrived, his family heard about Dorian's destruction in Abaco. That's when his wife and youngest son decided to leave McLeanstown. McIntosh chose to stay behind.
My wife called me and she said, I said I left my medication. I forgot my medication. Secure them for me, please. I walk right back here. This is my front room. And I got the medication. And by the time I was walking, going back that way, the water started rising and the pointer was coming. The pointer we had here, they were coming there, they were chasing me back that way.
McIntosh says he acted quickly and propped himself on a closet drawer to climb into a ceiling. As water levels rose and winds got louder and stronger, he was swept away in his home.
One of my friends found me the next afternoon. A wood piece of 2x4, something hit me here. You see the scar? And I was airlifted to the Prince Market Hospital and also by the United States Coast Guard. I was there for about 2 weeks. I came back home. I was living in a tent for almost a year.
Today, McIntosh is rebuilding his home.
This is where I am now, and I thank God. I thank God because, you know, many people didn't make it. 5 people, 3 children and 2 adults from the same community perished in that hurricane. No? But I survived.
Tonight, Isaiah is thanking all of those who have helped him in rebuilding his home because he says he could not do it alone. Reporting live from Freeport, Grand Bahama, I'm Jamila Mizik. Italia, back to you.
Thanks so much, Jamila. Our Jamila Mizik in Grand Bahama and our Bertha McDermott in Abaco reporting for us tonight. Thanks to you both. We are now moments away from a special edition of RTV's On the Record with Jerome Sawyer. Dorian, 3 years later, live from Abaco. Hear from survivors, weather experts, and government officials beginning at 8 o'clock right here on RTV. That's a special edition of On the Record with Jerome Sawyer. Dorian, 3 years later. It's time now for your first check on temperatures. Meteorologist Greg Thompson joins us now. A quiet evening weather-wise, Greg?
Yes, thanks, Italia, and welcome everybody for our first look at weather on this warm Thursday evening. Temperatures in the mid-80s, 88 degrees outside our studios with just a few clouds. Your winds are very light, east-southeast at 7 miles per hour, and your feels-like temperature a very warm 95 degrees. Satellite view, high-pressure ridge in charge. We got a lot of sunshine today, a lot of warm temperatures. Temperatures managed to get up into the 90s with your feels-like temperature in the triple digits. A couple isolated showers mainly across the extreme northwest Bahamas and on at the backside of Andros. All in all, conditions will be improving tonight as we lose the heating and the clouds. That's your first look at weather. Your extended forecast is still to come.
Thanks, Greg. And when we come back, find out what led to the arrest of that inmate who escaped from the Department of Corrections. Also, a suspected suicide claims a man's life. What investigators are saying. Plus, class is back in session for students of TA Thompson. It's all coming up when our news returns.
What we're doing is we seem to be saying to 80% of the student population, you're really not good enough.
The PGCSE is a Bahamian exam. Your average is going to be around that high point, which is the D.
Schools are churning out 5,000 children a year that need jobs.
We're producing generations of Bahamians whose goal is to get out.
Inmate Winston Walker has been recaptured. Police reporting the 30-year-old Jamaican national's freedom was short-lived as he was arrested around 1 a.m. this morning. His arrest reportedly came after a Seabreeze resident called police to report a prowler on their property. He was captured only hours after escaping. On Wednesday, the Minister of National Security sounded the alarm about Walker's escape, saying he was on remand at the Bahamas Department of Corrections for a number of serious offenses. Walker's method of escape is still unknown to the public at this time. Now that Walker is safely back in police custody, police are thanking the public for their assistance. Police are investigating the circumstances surrounding an alleged suicide on Kelly Lane off Johnson Road. Our Megan Shepard was on the scene.
No, 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 no.
Family members crying out as police were investigating the discovery of a man's body in bushes this afternoon. Police press liaison officer, Chief Superintendent Chrislyn Skipping says police were called to the scene shortly after 2:30 p.m.
We received a call that a male was found in this area. We responded and discovered a male with a cable wire about his neck. EMS responded and pronounced the victim deceased.
Now, Chief Superintendent Skipping says the body was discovered some 200 yards into that track road. She confirmed that upon the arrival of police, the body was discovered with cables around his neck. However, initial reports into police say the body was actually discovered by civilians hanging from a tree. Now, Skipping says they are still investigating what may have led up to the incident. However, she is sending this message as it relates to mental health support.
There may be persons who may be going through various issues. It may be financial, it may be emotional from relationships. If you are going through some sort of difficult situation, I want to encourage you to reach out and speak to someone.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Megan Shepard.
It's now time for tonight's Financial Market Minute, brought to you by RF, your local investment bank. This has been your Financial Market Minute. To explore the best performing mutual funds in the Bahamas, visit our website at www.rfgroup.com.
When our news comes back from the break, classes are back in session at T.A. Thompson Junior High. Plus, your sports action is coming up with Marcellus Hall. Marcellus, what do we have tonight?
All right, well, Natalia, coming up in sports for you tonight, Jonquil Jones and the Connecticut Sun. They were looking to even their series with Chicago, or rather take a 2-0 lead against Chicago. Didn't turn out that way. We'll give you details on that. We'll also tell you the latest from the Government Departmental Basketball Association and what's going on with them. That's all coming up in sports.
Sounds great, Marcellus. Plus, weather is brewing in the tropics. Meteorologist Greg Thompson has the latest when our news returns.
What we're doing is we seem to be saying to 80% of the student population, you're really not good enough.
The PGCSE is a Bahamian exam. Your average is going to be around that high point, which is the D.
Schools are churning out 5,000 children a year that need jobs.
We're producing generations of Bahamians whose goal is to get out.
This is our news. Welcome back. It's been 3 days since public school classes kicked off the 2022-2023 academic school year, and students at T.A. Thompson Junior High School are back in the classroom after being displaced for nearly 2 years due to structural issues. I spoke with the school's acting principal this morning.
But right now we're just working out the kinks and logistics of moving around campus while maintaining as close to the safety protocols as we can.
That's T.A. Thompson Junior High School acting principal Ishmael Smith detailing how students and teachers are now able to access the classrooms at the school's Gregory Street campus. Those classes are back in full swing after nearly 2 years of structural issues that forced students to temporarily relocate to the University of the Bahamas. As for how students are adjusting after not being on the campus for months,
I think the only grade that is really seen this campus for any time would have been the 9th grade before we shut down the last time, and they were only here for about 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And so they would have gotten used to some form of in-person over at UB because that was in-person, but full in-person, that's going to take some adjusting to.
Smith says most of the construction is complete, but there is still a little more work to be done.
They are completing erecting all of the railings up to the 3rd floor, and the central stairwell where the elevator shaft is, those railings will go in. That's closed off until Monday. Those railings will go in so that we can have access to the stair because the shaft runs down the middle and the stair wraps it. And so until the railings are on the stair, they have to put the lattice work around the entire structure. But hopefully by Monday, we'll be able to collapse it to just the elevator shaft, and then we will have the stairs access, and that should help in movement.
The Chicago Sky even their series against the Suns despite a big night from Jonquel Jones. Marcellus Hall joins us now in studio with more.
All right, thanks, Natalia. Welcome to our sports, everybody. I'm Marcellus Hall. Jonquel Jones, Connecticut Sun. They were trying to go up 2-0 in their best-of-5 series against the Chicago Sky as they make their way through the WNBA playoffs. Last night, playing once again in Chicago, hoping to steal a 2-0 lead, but turns out Chicago had different plans. Let's take a look.
Game 2, best-of-5 series in WNBA playoffs. Second round, Jonquel Jones and the Connecticut Sun going up against the Chicago Sky. Jones and the Sun looking to take a 2-0 series lead after winning game 1. Chicago, though, would try to stall that as they try to even things up. Good night for Jones as she finished up with a good day on the stat sheet. Looking at her numbers on the day, how about this? Jonquel leading the team in scoring, 23 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, doing everything she could in 28 minutes on the floor. Unfortunately, though, it would come in the losing effort as Chicago gets to win to even things up. 85-77 ends up being the final score. Two teams will meet again on Sunday. That'll be game 3 of the best-of-5 as the series now shifts to Connecticut. So Jonquel and the Sun will have a home court advantage, hopefully, as they head into that continuation of the series.
And that is your look at sports here on this Thursday. I'm Marcellus Hall. Back to you, Italia.
Thanks so much, Marcellus. And we are moments away from a special edition of our TV's On the Record with Jerome Sawyer. Dorian 3 years later, live from Abaco. And Greg is back in the Weather Center watching a newly named tropical storm. What are we seeing, Greg?
Yes, Italia, what the difference 24 hours make. We're still watching 3 systems out there, but we have a newly formed tropical storm Daniel up near Bermuda, churning out there in the Atlantic Ocean. And of course, we're still watching those 2 systems in the tropics. We'll tell you more about that later on in an extended forecast.
Thanks, Greg. It's all coming up when our news returns.
What we're doing is we seem to be saying to 80% of the student population, you're really not good enough.
The PGCSE is a Bahamian exam. Your average is going to be around that high point, which is the D.
Schools are churning out 5,000 children a year that need jobs.
We're producing generations of Bahamians whose goal is to get out.
Welcome back to our news. Activity getting a little busier in the tropics. Greg is in the Weather Center watching Tropical Storm Daniel in the Central Atlantic. What can you tell us, Greg?
Yeah, thanks again, Natalia. We are watching now a newly formed Tropical Storm Daniel, that formed to the north of Bermuda. Rather weak system right now. A couple of isolated showers and thunderstorms associated with that, but we expect the conditions to be improving as the system is expected to make it to hurricane status by late tonight and into the weekend and continue to meander out there just to the north of Bermuda. Shouldn't pose any problems for us here, but Bermuda may see some swells from the system as the system continues that meandering, and then eventually by early next week it pushes towards north and east and away from them. Also in the tropics, we're watching that system just off the Cape Verde Islands. That has a medium chance for formation. Still a lot of showers disorganized with that system. And then the main system that is of interest to us here locally, that system in the Central Atlantic, just approaching the Leeward Islands as we speak. Showers and thunderstorms becoming a little more organized. It still has a very high chance for formation as it pushes towards the west-northwest and is expected to stay to the east of the islands by early next week. Taking a look at the satellite picture, as of course, Bermuda, that system up there, Daniel, Tropical Storm Daniel, still spinning out there. Showers not quite organized, but as I mentioned, they will tend to get organized later on into the weekend and possibly make it to hurricane status. Then we have that system out there near the Cape Verde Islands, disorganized showers and thunderstorms, and one that is approaching the Leeward Islands, becoming a little more organized right now. We will continue to monitor that as it makes its progress towards the west-northwest. Boating forecast for the northwest Bahamas tonight through tomorrow. Your winds will be out of the east to southeast at 10 to 15 knots. Seas running 2 to 4 feet over the ocean. Your tide is presently low, will be high at 11 minutes past midnight. For the central and southeast Bahamas, east to southeasterly wind flow a little stronger at 15 knots. They will be gusting at times across the southeast Bahamas, and your seas running 3 to 5 feet over open waters. Here's a look now at your national forecast. In your extended forecast, isolated showers and thunderstorms in the forecast tomorrow. We improve for the weekend. Temperatures will stay rather warm, but those winds expected to pick up, so we're looking at some rather breezy conditions across the central and southeast Bahamas. That's a look at our weather. Make it a safe evening, everybody.
Thanks so much, Greg, and thank you for joining us for our news tonight. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm Natalia Hall. Now a special edition of On the Record with Jerome Sawyer. Dorian 3 years later starts now, live from Abaco.